Okay. So so if we talk about lambda, it's basically it's a serverless computing, computing, and we have we don't need any server. We don't need any server to execute lambda function. So the runtime environment is given by AWS. Okay. But AWS Lambda has some limitation. Okay. The limitation is like one is Lambda has some limitation. So one is limitation is time execution limit. Okay. So time execution limit is 15 minutes. That is more, but you cannot execute very big execution code you cannot run. Okay. Like suppose your Lambda, your code is needed more than 15 minutes, so you cannot run. So 15 minute means 900 second. 900 second is this time. Okay. So it's small kind of functionality is there. If the logic is within 15 minutes you can execute, you can use Lambda. But there is an alternate for that also. Okay. So if your time limit is more than 15 minutes, so you can break your Lambda into two lambdas. So one Lambda function is divided into multiple lambdas. Okay. So then you can break it. And one Lambda handler function will invoke another Lambda function. Okay. And Lambda has a size limit also. Okay. So size is like when you are uploading your code on the Lambda function, like you have to upload the zip, right? So one is like you are creating Lambda. Okay. So when you're creating a Lambda function, there is a very less size, right? But suppose you have a Lambda zip, right? Some zip file you have a code. Zip file you have Python code. So not only Python files, there are some libraries. ZIPs will be there. Libraries zip, right? Like pandas. So pandas is the one library, which is these are the external libraries. So Python has not on libraries. Sometimes we have to bring some extra libraries are there, right? So pandas is the one library that we need, or some libraries, right? Third-party libraries. So some um, third parties libraries, jar you, zip you need it. Okay. So when you combine with lambda function, lambda function, it will become more size. Okay, it will become more size. So if it is crossing 50 MB. So then you have to break it. Okay. So these are the some criterias are there. Like we have to design our lambda function in such a way that the time limit and maximum size limit is the 50 MB. Okay. Because they kept it this particular limit. Okay. So if the library, suppose if my lambda is not able to take it the library zip, so there is another one option is layers. So layer is right, you can add any third party libraries using lambda layer. Okay. So lambda layer concept, we can allow external zip. Okay. To support lambda function. Okay. So these are the things we have to keep in mind when we are creating a lambda function. Okay. So lambda can be triggered from any source or lambda can trigger any target. Okay. So if I say lambda can be triggered from the AWS S3, can trigger lambda. Okay. Can trigger lambda. Okay. API gateway. API gateway is a REST API services. Okay. We can write our own REST API service. Endpoint can trigger lambda. Okay. Okay, that can trigger lambda. Like my SQS queue is there. So SQS queue is the messages are coming in the queue, right? You are publishing some messages. So you are publishing some messages that is triggering your lambda function, triggering lambda function. Okay. And lambda function can trigger SQS queue. So SQS lambda function can send messages to SQS queue. Okay. So this is all like vice versa, right? Lambda can trigger API gateway. Some REST API endpoint you can trigger from Lambda. So REST API gateway, REST API gateway endpoint, REST API endpoint can be triggered from the Lambda. Okay. So this is like a bidirectional. Some events are there, and suppose you are so I told yesterday some Boto 3 is there, right? So Boto 3 libraries, Boto 3 libraries, APIs, APIs we use to write Lambda code. Okay. So we have to get the resource. We have to get the resource or like create a client, right? So some cases we get the resource. Okay, Boto 3 dot resource. Okay, so Boto 3 Boto 3 dot resource. Okay, and we give the resource name. Okay, so DynamoDB, these are the resources like DynamoDB, okay, or RDS. These are the resources, right? We can get the resource. Okay, or the other way is we can get the client. So client for S3, right? Boto 3 dot client. Okay, so Boto 3 dot client. So we'll get client object, and that client object we can invoke any function, right? Either we can write the file, read the file. So get file, put file, get file, those functions we can call. So we can get the client for S3. Okay. So depending on the use case, right, we will use either Boto 3 dot resource or Boto 3 dot client. Okay. So resource we can use for anything, but S3, right, we use the because like when we are using we use the client. Okay. So next use case I'm going to show you guys to SQS, right? How to get the message from the SQS, and SNS also we can do. So SNS is a simple notification service. So SNS can trigger lambda. Okay. And lambda can trigger SNS message, right? Lambda can trigger. So what is the SNS? SNS is a simple notification service. So either email or message, like there are many different protocols are there. SMS is there, email is there. There is some alert mechanisms. So these are the different protocols are there. Okay, so we will test it with the email, right? Email notification to we can trigger lambda or lambda can trigger SNS. Okay, so this is possible. Okay, so first of all we go to the create a queue for SQS. So SQS is a very simple service. SQS is SQS. So we have to create some queue, our queue. So I'm going to create some queue, my queue. And there are two options, like standard queue or FIFO. Okay. So only the difference is first in, first out, like the queue which will be coming the messages first, that will be going out first, first in, first out delivery, exactly once processing, at least once, and the message ordering is not preserved, right? So messages can go in any order, like if you are sending more messages, right? Like, so this is the ordering is not guaranteed. So we create a queue. Now we can, so this is the, in the queue, we can send the message. So here, so we go to the queue and send messages. If you want to get the messages, so pooling is there. So any, okay, suppose from the SNS topic. So I will tell what because any service can access any other service, because all services can be integrated with each other. So this is with the SNS integrations, okay, or lambda trigger integrations or event bridge, okay, okay. Event bridge we define the rules. So event bridge we can define rule and we can trigger those rules, right? And based on the rule we can trigger our service. Okay, so if I want to send message, here is the sending messages. We have the option, we can send the message. Okay, so but this message still I'm not configured, right? Which lambda this SQS is configured. So that part I have not configured. Okay, so if I want to configure it, so here is a lambda trigger is there. I can tell here configure lambda function. So if I select my lambda function, so yesterday I created one lambda function. So same function I can use it, or I can create a new function. But if I use the same function, so I have to change the code. So here the one error is coming because yesterday we were using a one role, right? So this particular role doesn't have the permission. Okay. So I will go to lambda. So in the lambda, we know role is very important because role is allowing this particular service you can trigger or not. So we go to configuration here. Here we can this one permission. So there is a role. In this role, if you don't add the particular service permission, we cannot do. So I told you one minimum permission we need this for running lambda function. Just lambda function I want to run. But if I want to trigger any other service or I want to access the other service, I need to add that service. So here, what I'm going to do, I send the message from the queue in SQS and I should receive in the lambda. So lambda should have the full access of the SQS. So I will add here SQS full access, add permission. Okay. Now I will try here again because I was trying here, I was getting the error. I was getting the invalid parameter value exception. Okay. So let me try it again. Now I choose the lambda function and I save it. So now it's successfully saved. So you seen here in the queue, I have added one lambda trigger. Can you see? I added a one lambda trigger here. I added. Okay. And if you want to check the same configuration, right? Lambda, like this trigger is configured automatically in the lambda as well. So if you come here, if you refresh, because this is my previous one before configuring the SQS trigger. So now I will refresh there. So one more SQS will come here. Okay. So you can add trigger from here itself also if you add trigger option. And here is a SQS. So here also it will be asking the queue name. So when you drop down queue and then add, so you can add. But you already add the trigger. Now you are trying the same trigger. So it is already same. The SQS and function lambda already exists. Okay. So you cannot do it the same thing again. Okay. Because you are trying the same queue with the same lambda, which you already configured from the queue SQS you have done. Okay. So either you do from there or here, it will be the same configuration. Okay. So if you add it here, it will come over there. If you add there, it will come here. Okay. So now I want to check my messages. Okay. Because this code is particularly S3 code. Yesterday we done. Okay. I keep it this code in the notepad. So you can change the code. Okay. So I've just mentioned it. This is the S3 lambda. So just copy paste this code, create any lambda, because all code you cannot merge. Okay, here I can call the different trigger. Trigger is not a problem because this trigger is not impacting anything on this trigger. But this code will not work, right? Because now I'm trying to hit from the SQS queue. So I'm trying from the SQS queue if I'm sending the message. So if I send the message here, okay. So I'm getting the event, but I'm not having those parameters which I'm expecting from the event here in the lambda. So these will not be there, like bucket, and these will not be there. Okay. So I need to change that code. Okay. So if I check monitor, I check log. Okay. Oh, it is coming S3. Okay, S3 is, oh, I have not updated code. Okay, so S3, this what is coming if I print. Okay, so I was saying like some error are coming. Okay, because I'm trying to hit from the SQS. So it is showing some syntax error on line number 9. Unmatch. This one. Okay, so whatever event I'm receiving from SQS, this is a SQS. This is SQS message. Can you see here? This is new message. So you can get this message. You can get this message, but when you are trying like S3, so it will not be able to find the S3 property in this, because S3 property will not be there because this event has only SQS related properties, right? So we will not find the bucket and file because I'm not going to trigger. Okay. So either you can write a code which can, like, you can check it, right? If the value, if the parameter is there in the JSON, then only you can read the value. Okay. So you can find it. What is the source type is there? Like, this is a source type of event is a AWS SQS. If it is a source type event is a S3. So you can read the message. Okay. So right now you cannot read these properties because it is not coming in the message. Okay. So if you want to read the other properties, so when you read the SQS, so you can get it like this, you can print. So any SQS message. So record. So you can get the records from the event of record, and then you can. So so you can see now my test message is printing. Okay. Suppose you are sending more messages, right? You are sending one by one messages to the queue. Right now only one message I publish in the queue. So if you publish more messages, so your this code will print all the messages in the queue. Okay. So it is retrieving whenever the one time the lambda hit, right, from the SQS. So it will get all the messages from the queue. Okay. So this is the one like how we can get the message. Okay. From the SQS. So the layer thing is this. So here, right, if you see here, we can add layer. So if any, just like last time I just run this one, pandas is added. So you have the option add layer, and there is a option like you want to create a custom layer, you want to write some custom zip you have, so you can do. Otherwise, some default libraries by default is provided by AWS. Okay. So light extension, something as these are the some machine learning or some like other libraries are there. Okay. So this way you can add the any pandas related code, like if you are using, because we were using some pandas library, right? So we are reading some pandas, so that's the reason we added a layer for pandas. Okay. So we have added. So any other trigger like we can add, right? I want to like API gateway. So API gateway, there is a one way, right? Either you can create some new API and that can hit your Lambda. So you have the option here in the Lambda, you can create a one API here and that API will be hitting the Lambda. So you are going to create an API from here directly. Okay. And other way is you go to the API gateway and configure some REST API configure some REST API and tell your Lambda function. So here I'm telling about my Lambda. Okay, so I'm just setting it here. So I'm telling my API name. By default, it's giving your API name is whatever your Lambda and API. And deployment stages they are giving. So I say this is my dev. Okay, and if you want to enable your matrix or error logging. So I think this way is just you add the one API. So your API gateway is configured. When you come here, you will see one REST API endpoint is given. So if you hit this REST API endpoint, this so if we go to API gateway, so this API gateway also the same API is created. So if you see, this one is configured here. So if I want to create the same thing here, let me show you from here also. So you can check create API. So here the option is coming, which type of API you want to create. So I want to create a REST API and I'm giving a new API. So I say some item API. Okay. So I want to invoke some item API and by default it's a regional. Okay, there are the other options, but regional is a we have to choose and create API. So it has created. So we have to add a method first. We have to add a method. Then we will add the resource. Okay. So method is like I want to hit my API and get the response from the Lambda. Okay. I want to get the response. So I will provide some input parameter to my Lambda by this API call and get the result from Lambda. I will get it. Okay, so get function I'm triggering and I'm saying here Lambda function. So I'm telling here my Lambda function will be triggered by this API and Lambda proxy integration I have to enable and here I have to choose Lambda function. Okay, so Lambda function you can choose and default timeout is giving 29. So it will keep trying 29 to hit 29 second to hit to the Lambda. If Lambda is not available or any issue is there, so it will be timeout. Okay. So other settings like you can send more request parameters, request header. Suppose you want to add some body parameter, we can do. But this is my get request. So I'm not adding all these one. Just simply I'm creating a method. So one of my method is created. Now I have to like get method is some get function we have to define, right? Like get item something like I have to create a resource. So I say get item. Okay. So so I have created my get item function, right? Right. Okay. So I have created a resource. So resource means you can have any type of resource. Okay, one is a method and one is a resource. So method is just defining what type of operation you want to do, whether you want to get or you post or update, delete. So there are the REST API methods are there. But resource can be anything, right? Okay, you can say employee is a resource. So employee you can apply a post, get, put, delete. Item can have the get, post, put, delete, right? So I'm doing just get as a method and item is a resource. So there can be a multiple methods can be there for the same resource, right? I can use. Okay. So now next thing is I have to deploy this API. So when and I can take the API from some other source also, import API. So stage is there. So new stage and dev stage. Okay. I can define some stage means this API you want to use for which environment. It's a dev environment, QA, UAT. So I'm just giving us some name. Okay. So it is giving this particular URL is giving. This is a URL. So if you see here, like what URL we invoke here, similar way, it is giving the URL here. So this URL is for my lambda. Okay. So I'm getting the error because my lambda is not able to handle this request, right? Because if I check in my lambda function what my event is printing, okay? So I go to monitor, I check the CloudWatch log. So I'm printing the top event I'm printing, right? Any event is coming, I'm printing it, okay? So okay, so this is a permission issue again, like API gateway. We cannot record. Okay, event record is not there. So, okay, let's change this code. I copy this code for SQS trigger. Okay. So second code is this SQS trigger. So next code you will try SQS trigger lambda. But IAM role you add it. So keep it one role and add all the permissions. Okay. So even it is here API gateway is not there, but initially mm, okay, so record of event. So first we print. First we see the event message, right? We see what is coming in the event. Okay. So just simply we hit the API gateway and check what is coming in the event. We already, this is not printing. This let is not change. Okay, let me remove this trigger. How this trigger is. It is not changing. I deploy it into event. Okay. So this time the hit is done and I'm able to see this output. Okay. So any response I can return back. Okay. So whatever body response I'm returning from here, that will be returned to my API gateway endpoint. Okay. So I'm getting this response. Okay. So what are the parameters are taken? So if I want to see my CloudWatch log, so in the CloudWatch log, I can see I'm able to see this entire request JSON. Okay, so this JSON has my parameter. So this, if I'm sending some parameters here, right? Suppose I say here I'm sending question mark some ID equal to 1. Okay, like this parameter I'm sending. So this parameter value I can get in my lambda function. Okay, so I can check the CloudWatch log and I can read the parameter. So this is a second hit. Okay, so this one, because this one the ID parameter will not be there, but this one will be ID parameter there. So if we copy this message, and if I want to check, so here I have to check ID equal to 1 is there. If I take it, this query string parameter of my event, right? Okay, so I will find this query string parameter. I can check it, right? This ID equal to 1. So this ID value 1, I can take it and then I can get it like, okay, this particular ID, I can use it to get the value from the DynamoDB table. Suppose I want to connect to DynamoDB table and there is some data I want to get it, I can get it. So this is kind of integration where you are hitting the API gateway and REST API endpoint, you are hitting Lambda and telling your ID 1. And this ID 1, you want to get the data from the. So first of all, you have to get this query string parameter. So this query string parameter, get parameter. So we have to, from this query string parameters, to get the value of, so in the Lambda function, this is the event of query string parameter. So when you print this one, so you will get the ID value. So query string parameter, you say here ID equal to event of query string parameter. And once you get this ID, you can connect to DynamoDB and then get the data from the table. Okay, so DynamoDB, this is the DynamoDB code. So you can add a DynamoDB resource. You can add this DynamoDB and you can, okay. So once you get the table object, this object, and this table writes, because here I'm going to write the data. So I'm reading data from S3 and writing a new record in the, but there is a get item, we can get the item. So how to get the item, like entire response as a table item, I can get it. So I should have, if I have employee ID, I can get the, so get table record from DynamoDB. Lambda function. So I have to get it, like how to get the parameter. So one is a writing, you can write the data in the in the DynamoDB, or you can get the data from DynamoDB. Mhm. Using Lambda. So suppose you are sending some ID 1. So this test you can do without API gateway, because you can put this ID 1 as a test event. So you can add as a test event here. So configuring test event. So you can ID, suppose you want to test the value for 1. Okay, so this parameter is not met. So this one also you can test, right? This you can save it, and whenever you want to test with the my event, you can test it. Okay, so your ID one will be, you can get the event of, you can get the ID. Okay, and once you get the ID, you can write DynamoDB code like this. So you will be get item, you will be calling like this. So you are getting some ID, and then you can, that ID value you are getting event.id. But we are getting the ID, but this is not the Python one. This is Node.js. Okay. So this is the Node.js Lambda, but we have to find the Python. Okay. So Python code we have to get. So so simple, like some ID. So your table should have, like you have already created some table, you have created policy, all those things we already. So DynamoDB we have to add in our role. Okay, so in our role, DynamoDB we have to add. Uh, so here is DynamoDB full access is not there. DB full access. Even other roles are not needed, but if you keep it, that's not a problem. You can keep it your role. Okay, so here, put item, get item. So like this, you have Boto3 client DynamoDB and client dot get item, and table name you can provide, and key you will provide, and this key you will pass the value. So we go to Lambda. So in this one, our parameter is coming, ID is this one. Okay, this ID value is coming. And this ID is a key, is EMP ID. Okay. I think this is okay. So this event will trigger. I will print ID and table name is EMP. So we check the DynamoDB table. Okay, here is no table. So EMP one. So I check the table here. Create item is there. You can create the item. So this is you can run a scan. So you will get the data, or you can run the query. You can do or a scan. You can do. You are getting the data. Okay, so okay, I deploy it, and now I trigger lambda. So error is coming. So ID is one is coming, and when it is failing here, some 81 and str type, string type. But when it's going to okay, so we just make it as we make it. Okay, our table has numeric type, so we make it and for number. So your data is coming like this, ID1 when printing the ID. Okay, so this is not having, it's a key value pair. It's a dictionary, right? So ID of, so ID of ID we gave. We can test here with the my event. Oh, but my event is, this will not be there in the my event. String indices must be integer. So this is a string type. What is a type is printing. The value one is coming. Type is string coming. Okay, so type is integer now. So this, here we can give. It is not able to retrieve the data based on the, okay, let's do this one directly. Table name is EMP. In the DynamoDB, what is the schema? Both are string. Okay, I will check it. Meanwhile, you just try this put item one. Okay, try this code, which is reading the S3 bucket, and this file I will provide. This is or even you can create this file emp.csv, but change your bucket and change your file name. Okay, and then you try to write the data into DynamoDB. Okay, so I will add this code. This code. Okay. So this is the code for trigger S3 to lambda and write to data into DynamoDB. And basic API gateway you try. Okay, just try trigger API gateway. Okay, configure the API gateway. Configure API gateway with lambda trigger and write lambda function get data from DynamoDB. Okay, so I will give the complete code, but you try this. Okay, okay, try this one. Yeah, thank you.